This is a short PowerPoint video that is going to explain how to use Voter Vault 3, which is now called GOP Data Center, to get out the vote in your precinct. We did this back when, in my precinct, when GOP Data Center was called Voter Vault, and by using it, we were able to double turnout in our precinct. All we needed was an internet connection at that time, Internet Explorer, and then a printer to print out call sheets and walking sheets. And we did this on our own, uh, and it took us only about 3 hours a piece, each of us, to double Republican turnout. This slide simply shows my old precinct, Tempe 59 in Tempe, Arizona, in Maricopa County. And it shows the streets, and these maps are available from our county recorder's office. This slide shows the number of Republicans that we had in our precinct. We had 8 precinct committeeman slots, Republican precinct committeeman slots, and 8 were filled. Of the 895 Republicans, 329 or 36.75% were perfect voters. That is, they voted in 4 of the last 4 elections, primary or general. So we decided we don't have to touch these voters in any way. They'll go vote. On the other end of the spectrum are the 04 Republican voters. Those were the ones who had not voted in the last 4 elections. 66 of those, 7.3% of the total number of Republican voters in name only existed. That's what I call these 04 voters, voters in name only. They're registered, but they don't vote. 113 of the whole were 1/4 voters, 1/4 voters. That means they voted once in the last 4 elections. 121, 13.5%, were 2/4 voters. They voted 50% of the time. And then 20 were brand new voters, 05 voters. They had never voted in the precinct. They were either new voters that just come of age and registered, or they had moved into the precinct. And the rest, the 3/4 voters, we decided to treat them like the 4/4 voters. There was a 75% likelihood that they would vote, and we would not bother trying to get them to the polls. So here's a recap of what we needed to do. If you total up the 05s, the 04s, the 14s, and the 24s, it's 320 voters, about 35% of the whole, that we 8 precinct committeemen needed to go out and nudge or touch. And we were going to do that through a phone call and then a promised literature drop showing the difference between these candidates for mayor and city council. It's a nonpartisan race, and how they differed from the ones that we didn't want them to vote for. So with 320 voters and 8 precinct committeemen, that was about 40 voters per precinct committeeman. About 30 of the 40 voters were early voters, so that meant that when the ballots got mailed out to the early voters, we'd have to make about 30 phone calls and then door knocks or literature drops for the early voters for each precinct committeeman. And then right before election day, the weekend before election day, we'd have to contact another 10 voters. That only takes about 3, maybe 4 hours tops per precinct committeeman. So this slide shows a sample ballot that we created for our voters. We took the sample ballot that comes in the mail and we put circles around the people that we wanted them to vote for. And then we told them that we were recommending that they vote for these people. We included literature from the campaigns of these 3 candidates, and then we also put on the sample ballot our names and our contact information, telling them if they needed any information that they should contact us. So this slide shows my part of the project. This is a printout that I created using Voter Vault. It's the call sheet, walking sheet of the people that I was going to contact. We cut the precinct up into 8 sections. Each precinct committeeman got a section. This was in street order, so all I had to do was walk down one side of the street and go back the other side after making the phone calls. Some of the people didn't have telephone numbers. Those that didn't just got the literature drop. The notes show that whether I left a message, I actually talked to somebody. And this was a sheet for the general election. There was a similar one that I had for the primary election. So here's what we did, the little bit that we did, and what huge results we garnered. The entire time I spent stuffing bags, literature drop bags with candidate literature, and making the phone calls, and then doing the drop-offs of the literature. I kept track of my time. It took me 3 hours. 3 hours for the primary, 3 hours for the general. So what were the results? Compared to the citywide average of all voters, we had almost double the turnout of Republicans in both the primary and the general election. Our conservative mayoral candidate survived the primary, and one of the 2 city council candidates did. And we did this again in the general election. And it took even less time in the general because we had already done it once before, so we were a little bit more efficient. I tried to get the campaign experts who were consulting for these candidates to do this, and they wouldn't listen to me. I tried to get the candidates to do it. They wouldn't listen to me. If they had, they would have won, and you'll see how they would have won with hard numbers in the next slide. So here was the results in the general election. We had 46.8% turnout in our precinct of Republicans as compared to the citywide turnout of all voters of 26.6%. Both of our candidates lost. The mayoral candidate lost by less than 1 percentage point, 139 votes. So here's a breakout by party of the voters in our precinct who bothered to vote. Republicans, we got 431 out of 919 for 46.8%. The Democrats got 287 out of 720 for 39.8% turnout. Independents, the vaunted independents, only 34% of them voted, and the party not declared, only 17% voted. The Libertarians, only 23% voted, and only 1 out of 5 Green candidate voters voted. So the total number of ballots cast for our precinct was 898, and out of 2,428 voters for a general turnout of 36.9%. But our Republican turnout was much greater, as you can see. So what could have been? We could have had a landslide result for these 3 conservative candidates, including the 2 that made it to the general. The other one would have won in the primary as well. So in Tempe, there were 25,843 total active Republican voters. And assuming that 33% of them were like the Republican vinos, the voters in name only in Tempe 59, that's about 8,605 voters who needed a nudge to the polls, a gentle nudge, a telephone call, and a literature drop. So assuming that you had 40 get out the vote persons to use for these 8,605 voters, you'd need 215 bodies to get them to the polls. If you assign 40 of the voters to each individual, you need 215 volunteers. So assuming you had no precinct committeemen at all, and you just hired people for 3 hours of work, you'd need 645 man hours. Assuming that you spent $10 per man hour on these 645 man hours, that would have been $6,450 per election for the primary and for the general, for a total of $12,900. But you had 3 candidates, so assuming they worked together and they divided up the cost, that would have been $4,300 per candidate for both elections. But remember, if you've got all your precinct committeeman slots filled, Republican precinct committeeman slots, and you can get the Republican PCs to do 3 hours of work, it doesn't cost you anything. But I'm worst casing this that you'd have to hire people. As I said, we did it for free in Tempe 59 precinct, and the value of our work was about $480. I know that the mayoral candidate spent over $100,000 on all the stuff that doesn't work. He hired a messaging consultant who later said recently in a magazine article that the best work he ever did was for this candidate for mayor, but he learned his lesson, and they lost because the messaging was great, but they didn't have any ground game to get out the vote, whereas the Democrats focused on that. Gee, think of it. Focusing on getting the vote out. Wow, what a concept. So, what is it that we must do? Real simple. Become a precinct committeeman. Get a password, a user ID and a password. Every precinct committeeman is supposed to get one from the party. And then learn how to use it. Now, GOP Data Center is a dinosaur compared to real software that's really good, which the party will never give us. But it's good enough to get the job done. And as this presentation has proven, it works. So focus on actions that verifiably will get more Republican voters to the polls. We did it, and this is not rocket science. It really is not hard. So since this uh, election in 2012, uh, Voter Vault was renamed Voter Vault 3, and then it was updated to GOP Data Center. And in my new precinct after redistricting, it's now called Legislative District 18 and Corbell Precinct. And this was from a couple of years ago, what I'm reading here. We had 1,446 total Republican voters. Our precinct got larger. 620 of them were, what I would call vinos. They vote 50% or less of the time, voters in name only. So we have now 12 precinct committeeman slots. So you divide the 12 into the 620, you get 51.6 voters per precinct committeeman. So instead of it taking us 3 hours, it might take us 4 hours in the primary and the general to do what we did as I've described. Make phone calls, do literature drops to the people who don't normally vote and get them to vote. And if you get them to vote in the primary, then they're more likely to vote in the general as well. And you need Internet Explorer, which is free, and that's all it takes. And really, you only need one person in your precinct to coordinate this, and the rest, all they have to do is do the grunt work, make the phone calls and do the literature drops. And if we can do this, we can save civilization from the Democrats who want to take over our country and socialize it. So it's 2017 right now, and I'm making this record this narrated PowerPoint. This chart is from a couple of years ago. These were the numbers in Maricopa County and Pima counties of the voter registrations that we had. And as you can see, in Maricopa County, we had about 700,000 Republicans, about 513 Democrats, and 741, they're now called nuns. They don't have a party. Our total number of Maricopa County precincts is 724. And think of this, 289 of them, 40%, didn't even have a single precinct committeeman a couple of years ago. It hasn't improved. Only about 40% of our precinct committeeman slots in Maricopa County are filled. And conservatives need to fill those slots and start working together as soon as possible. So how do you find volunteers and new voters? Well, your only limitation is your imagination. This is a sign that was used for voter registration down in Florida by a friend of mine who's a precinct committeeman there. They put these signs around the tables that they had, and It's dated because it was when Obama was president, but it worked. So figure out a way to get people to come talk to you and um, and tell them that they need to become precinct committeemen. That's the end of this presentation. Thanks.